Alright, since I have a pretty important history test coming up tomorrow, I figured it's in my best interest to review for it, and I remembered in the back of my brain that the best way to learn something is to teach it, and it makes sense because if you can teach something, it basically means you retained all the knowledge and you understand it to the most of your extent. So, I'm going to go over Unit 6 of AP Modern World History taught in the, American education system called Consequences of Industrialization, which is all about imperialism because after people industrialize and get super powerful, they conquer and imperialize other countries because they're all rich and powerful. But basically, the context is Western European countries have been industrializing. They've been getting more factories. They've been advancing technologically and all that good stuff. So once you industrialize, once you get more factories, you get more rich, and once you get more rich, you get more powerful. So at that point, when you're super powerful, you need more resources for one thing, and plus you're super powerful. So all your neighbors who fail to industrialize, you're going to conquer them for their resources, and because they suck, and you're way more stronger than them, so you're gonna conquer them for the fun of it. So fundamental reasons for imperializing: one, obviously economic. If you conquer more land, you're going to have more money and resources. That is obviously a given. That's a pro. Militarily, that's also a pretty much a given. If you conquer more land, you get more, area, more resources, and more power. You become a stronger empire. That's pretty much a given as well. And then the third one that we learned about, not one I expected, was racial/social reasoning. It's basically because most of the people who industrialized were Western European countries. These are white people. So white people took it upon themselves to conquer other ethnicities and other nations because they believed it was their responsibility to, in some form, liberate the other ethnicities. And we learned about, there's various terms for it, like social Darwinism or white man's burden. Basically, social Darwinism is the idea that some cultures and ethnicities have evolved further than certain groups. So basically, white people believed that they were further evolved than the other ethnicities. So they believed it was their burden, the white man's burden, to conquer these other nations and other ethnicities, and they thought it was their right or purpose to, advance them and, make them better or some crap. Basically, it's just racism. But the difference between this one that we learned is that there's always been racism in the past, but the difference with this one is they actually tried to back it up with like weird pseudoscience, and they said like, oh, we measured the brain, or we measured the skull size of a white man, and it said it's bigger than the other one, so it's obviously white men are smarter, I guess. But it's all just BS science, and it's just racism. But that was another reason for them to conquer other nations. And then the other thing we learned about is different types of imperialism. Colony, obviously, if you have a colony and you colonize someplace, you have direct control of it. Protectorate, I don't really get this one, but I'm assuming it's some form of like you make a deal with the native people of a land, and you kind of like, you let them do their own thing. You let them self-rule, but you also like make your presence known, and you leech off of their resources a bit. Same with spheres of influence. You kind of just like let them do their stuff, but you also leech off the economic aspect of it. But that's probably one of the shakier parts of the unit. I don't really get different types of imperialism, but different types of technologies that it facilitated. Obviously, the machine gun got developed, which is obviously overpowered when everyone's using like whatever they're using, like a weird musket that takes 500 years to reload. Machine gun is obviously revolutionary. Anti-malaria drug, obviously, when you have vaccine crap, you're gonna be better off. Telegraph, that weird telephone line looking thing that you can send Morse code on, or maybe they developed one that can send audio. I don't know, but that's obviously nice because you can send a message to someone like 500 miles away through like the use of this weird looking telephone line. That's obviously great. Steamships, obviously, if you have better ships, you're gonna be better off. But the first type of it, or the first main imperialism that we learned about, was British in India. British obviously got super rich off, for one, industrialization, and they also had joint stock companies, which is just like their weird like investment banking company type thing. But they got rich off that, and at the same time, the Mughal Empire, which was currently occupying India, they were getting messed up because inside India, there's two religions at the time, at least. There was Hindus and Muslims, which is Islam versus Hinduism, the two main religions there. So as they're conflicting and as they're getting like shambles and all fighting each other and all in a mess, a bunch of Western European countries say, hey, we're stronger, we industrialize, we're better than you, so they swoop in and take a bunch of land, and they're all shambles and fighting each other, so they don't really do anything about that. So in 1757, Europeans take Indian territory. This is their first step, and by 1818, the British defeat the French, who are also in India, because Western Europeans gotta like freaking fight for who can imperialize and conquer more. So by 1818, British had full like control of India, if you can call it that. But at that point, they let the Muslims and Hindu rulers like stay in power there. They just like supervised over with their weird British East India Company, which I'm assuming is just their funny way of saying like, where we have power here. We have this company. We have power here. We imperialize, but we're still gonna let you do your stuff. So they let the people there rule. So they just kind of like supervised it. But that was until the Sepoy Mutiny, which is otherwise known as the Indian Uprising of 1857, which is basically when sepoys, which is another term for Indian soldiers hired by the British to work for the British, those are called sepoys. So the sepoys kind of had a conflict where there was a rumor going around, because when you're a soldier you use guns, and I don't know how old guns work, but you need like some type of oil to like make the gun work better. And there was a rumor that went around that the British people had put pig and fat oil as that weird lubricant oil for the gun thing. So that obviously pisses off a bunch of Indians, because the main religions there are Hindus and Muslims. And in Hinduism, the cow is sacred, and in Muslim, I'm pretty sure you can't eat pork. It was one of the two. I might have flipped the two, but I just know we were taught that in Hinduism and Islam, pig and cow are like pretty sacred animals. So a rumor spreading that the British are putting pig and cow oil into like the gun things is obviously super offensive to the people. But I'm pretty sure the teacher said that was a rumor and it wasn't even true, so it kind of just, it was nothing. But that obviously pissed off a bunch of the sepoys, these Indian soldiers who are hired for the British. So they kind of get mad and they start revolting, and they start fighting because, you know, they're Indian and they gotta fight off the British. And then at a certain point, they're actually like, it was a pretty well spread rebellion type revolt, Sepoy Mutiny. But at some point, for one, I don't think they could connect properly, because it was like Hindus and Muslims. They didn't properly unite to make a more structured rebellion. They kind of just like fought back and made a bunch of chaos. And India was a super important colony for British, so they sent their whole army, apparently, or not the whole, they sent a huge amount of their own military to go into India and crush the Sepoy Mutiny, because India is too important for them. So the Sepoy Mutiny gets absolutely destroyed, and then after that, British comes in, swoops in, and say, yeah, you guys suck. We're gonna maintain direct control now. So instead of letting them have their own self-rule type thing, they're like, hell no, we're not gonna do that again. We're just gonna take direct control. So British takes direct control of India, and they also develop, they hire Indians in low local government, but that's pretty irrelevant. And they also just generally develop a lot of British infrastructure there. And a big argument point is, apparently people argue whether or not it was a good thing that the British colonized India. And one of the big arguments for it being a good thing is that British developed a bunch of railroads in India, which helped like something, I guess. You know, railroads are cool, they can help transport people and resources, but in the end that was all for themselves, and that was nothing for India. It just happened to somewhat benefit India in the future. So it's not really it was still pretty bad that India got imperialized. But after they fully take control of India, there is some form of Indian nationalism that sparks up, which is shown by the India National Congress and the Muslim League. These are the two things we learned. Just two nationalist groups that like show up after British takeover, and they're like, we should be more nationalists just to like keep our culture from shattering from the British. But anyways, that's British in India. That's one form that we learned. Imperialism in Southeast Asia, we went over this in like 5 minutes. Obviously, Western European countries want to route to China because China has hella resources, like all the silk and stuff. They're like known to be rich, so everyone wants to route to China for trade. So French takes Vietnam, U.S. takes Philippines, and British moves to Australia. So these are all relatively closer to China. But yeah, that's literally all we learned for that part. Imperialism in Africa, this has a lot of things to go over. Southern Africa has taken a lot for diamonds, and overall Africa just gets kind of imperialized in general. The XHOSA cattle killing. This was when, I don't know how to say that, the Xhosa. These people, this clan of people, they were getting imperialized by the British, and then one of the people had a vision apparently, and they were like, if we kill all the cows, the British, their spirits will like ward the British away. It was something along that line. I didn't follow the whole lore, but basically this weird tribe, this group, was getting imperialized, and then one of the people had a vision that said, if we kill our cows, they'll stop conquering us. So they killed all their cows, but the British did not stop conquering them. So they basically just like starved themselves and then died off, and the British kind of just, that was a pretty big fail. But Egypt, under Muhammad Ali, this guy, I think it was Muhammad Ali, not the boxer. Our teacher has to emphasize that. This guy in Egypt was developing, and he became massively in debt, So then he became massively in debt to the British, I think, and I think that was the plan originally from the British. So once they become horribly in debt and they can't pay it off, the British are like, you're in debt, we're going to conquer you now. So they just conquer Egypt completely. British take Egypt because they're in debt, and that's how they respond to debt. So British take Egypt because Egypt's in debt. Scramble for Africa in the Belgian Congo. South Africa is known for like rubber trees. It's like a weird plant for rubber, but basically in the Belgian Congo there's like a huge what's it called? It's like the plantation thing. It's like the farming of rubber in South Africa, just because like rubber's an important material. But basically there's this huge like plantation, like slave system for Africans working on rubber plants. They just achieve or acquire rubber because rubber's like the biggest, most important export of Africa. So there's a huge mass genocide apparently. A bunch of Africans are killed through this vigorous, awful process of rubber farming. So yeah, that's just another awful part of it. And then the Berlin Conference, there was a meeting to divide Africa. They of course invited no Africans apparently. So Western European countries got together and they got a meeting because Africa is it's the next target of their imperialism. So they're like, instead of fighting for this, let's make a deal. How do we conquer Africa? So they got a bunch of the Western European people together and they're like, all right, the plan is simple. Go take whatever you can take. Whatever you can take is yours. So they said, take what you want, or take what you can through whatever means you want. So Europeans split up and they all take Africa individually and take their own colonies. That's why Africa is like super split up between different Western European. We had to color a map for it. Boom, it's beautiful. Different countries took different parts of Africa, but overall the entirety of Africa was apparently conquered basically under 50 years. And supposedly a lot of places try to resist it, but they fail because British have guns and Africans don't. So Africa gets conquered in like under 50 years. Most of them, Ethiopia resisted for a good bit, but they also failed. Most of Africa just got imperialized overall. For like diamonds, mining centers, they have like palm oil too. Just Africa got horribly conquered, which is why even to this day there's still like remnants of those effects. But imperialism in Latin America, this is a short one. Latin America was always weak and kind of trash. They got independence by fighting off, during the French Revolution and crap. So they were independent from like European power, but they were still broke as hell. So the only thing they can do to make money is export their resources, which is meat and guano, some tropical thing. So after they export, they didn't really industrialize, so they were just weak. They were broke, so they can only export meat and guano to the British, and then the British kind of have to rely on that trade to even sustain function. So the British kind of take advantage of that, exploit them, and just like kind of scam them. So Latin America, while they didn't get conquered necessarily, they were taken advantage of economically because they're broke and can't really do anything, and the British can take advantage of them really easily. But that's Latin America. The other ones, I talked about this other one, China. I talked about China earlier. They got destroyed because drugs, opium war, and then overall, while Europe was industrializing, China was not industrializing, same as pretty much every other country in the world. So China gets kind of shreked and destroyed. So that's China. The Ottoman Empire, once one of the biggest empires and most powerful empires, did not industrialize, so they're getting crapped on. There's a lot of breakaways from the country due to nationalism, so that makes them weaker, and they also just like they're not innovating anything. Overall, their lack of industrialization and lack of initiative, lack of innovation, that just led to their overall downfall. The Russians, basically the same thing. They didn't industrialize. They were a bit conservative, so they kind of failed to like make any major changes. They're also they actually did try to industrialize, but there was like no political reform to adjust to that. So that's why there was like huge socialist, communist rebellions in Russia. So that happened. Russia kind of just fell off a little bit, but I don't know what the present day conditions are, but I think they like tried to come back. But Japan, a major difference for Japan is they, unlike everyone else, actually do manage to industrialize because they're cooler. And also, this one guy comes to Japan from the U.S. and says, "We're gonna shoot you if you don't trade with us." So the Japan's like, let's think about this. So they thought about it and they were like, okay, good deal. So they trade with U.S. As long as the U.S. doesn't conquer them. So the U.S. and Japan trade, and Japan also happens to harness and embrace every aspect of Western culture that they possibly can. So they industrialize. They end the Tokugawa shogunate, which is like an era, I guess you can call it, and they start what is known as the Meiji Restoration under Emperor Meiji, which is just modernization, industrialization. they start industrializing. They embrace Western culture. There's heavy amounts of nationalism where they just like love their country and crap. And they also have their own. When I said they embrace Westernization, Western culture, they also embrace imperialization or imperialism. So they also happen to implement some social Darwinism, and they think they're the best. They're the best Asian out of every Asian. So Japanese people think they're better. So they end up conquering Korea and China a little bit. They conquer them a little bit, but they also in World War II they attempt to conquer China. They got shit on. So they get sent back. But Japan overall becomes a world power in under a century because they just embrace Western culture and industrialization way better than any other country. Because a lot of people don't like the concept of a lot of people are conservative, in history. So they don't like change, so they don't innovate. But Japan, crazy innovation. They just overall industrialized and became more powerful, and then they just became a world power, unlike most of the other countries. And it still seems to get it today. All those car companies, Mitsubishi, Toyota, all of them are pretty much Japan. I'm pretty sure they're all Japanese, but Japan just did a lot of industrialization and modernization, which made them super strong. But that was all we learned for industrialization and imperialism. But another thing, last part of the unit is mass migration, because obviously push factors. When Europe overpopulated, obviously people are going to move out. There was cheaper transportation as technology innovated, so people are going to move out. Political conflicts, if there's political issues in your country, you're going to want to move out. Religious persecution, like the Jewish people getting hunted down throughout history, you're going to move out. Famine, the Irish potato famine, if there's a famine in your country, you're going to move out. So these factors all contributed to people trying to move out of their country, move out of their foreign or their native land, which is apparently the first time ever, because most people stay in their country their whole life. But now, or at this point at least, because of new technology and new conditions in the world, people are going to start moving around. And pull factors, other countries start industrializing. They have more open job slots, so obviously you're going to move to a place with more jobs. In America, Russia, and Canada, places like that, there's generous land policies where you can get a huge sum of land for a good deal if you just go there. So people are going to obviously go to the good deal. American migrants, a lot of people go to America for the opportunity. It's a generally nicer place than most other places in the country. Not to say there aren't flaws, but America, at least back then especially, was a huge land of opportunity, so everyone goes to America. Gold rushes, you're going to go to the place with more gold for the money, of course. And then religious freedom, you're going to go somewhere just to practice religion freely so you don't get persecuted. Those are the push and pull factors. Now, imperialism and labor force. In the early 19th century, apparently Africans had a huge slave trade across the Atlantic, which obviously lines up with Africans forced across the Atlantic. No, that's after the Civil War in America. No, slave trade got banned in 1807 apparently, but there were still trades of Africans in indentured servitude. That's what it's called. Basically, they signed a contract saying, we're going to move you to the new country, but in return you're going to work for us for friggin' 5 to 7 years, and then you can have freedom. And while you're working for us, you have food and protection and housing. So it's kind of a good deal, but at the same time it's a scam. But that's one of the things people use indentured servitude to kind of move across countries. Apparently the British transport a lot of Indian people to certain places under indentured servitude just so they can get more labor in certain places. That's obviously going to happen. But the immigration experience is obviously pretty bad conditions for most immigrants. It's also mostly men because it's a lot cheaper to send one guy over to a different country than the whole family. And also a lot of times it's just one guy moving to a different country to get a bunch of money and then come back to the family and support them economically. That happened a lot. And then ethnic enclaves. When you move to a new country and you don't know anyone there, you're obviously going to find people similar culture to you that also moved to that country. Big examples are Little Italy and Chinatown. Basically, when you move somewhere, you're going to want to find people of similar ethnicity and culture and background and language that can refer to you and make a little better small community. So I didn't know that about Chinatown. That was pretty cool to learn about. But yeah, obviously, if you move somewhere, you're going to want to get an environment that's more comfortable to you. But the last thing from the unit that we learned is many immigrants face discrimination, poor living conditions in their new homes. Two examples are the Chinese Exclusion Act, which denies Chinese entry into the U.S. In 1882, because apparently Chinese people were immigrating into the U.S. in mass numbers, so much so that people were threatened by them taking all the jobs, so they excluded Chinese people from entering the country. So that kind of sucked. And then White Australia policy, I think, same thing in Australia. They restrict Chinese immigration, and I don't know why it was specifically China. I guess they just had a specifically high amount of immigrants that wanted more stuff like that. But that's Unit 6. What was it? Consequences of industrialization. Basically, the key idea is that everyone's conquering each other, or at least Western European people got really powerful after industrializing, so they conquered a bunch of people. And then while conquering, there's also new colonies everywhere. The world is overall becoming like more mixed as a whole, so people start moving around. You move around to places for more opportunity. It's the start of a new era, and it's the start, in my opinion, it's the start of where the modern world has begun, where there's more diversity. America's finally a thing. Everything's shaping together to the present world as of now, and you can start to see like certain effects of the stuff we learned about in the modern world. So that's the unit I just wanted to study for, and hopefully I can get an A on my test tomorrow. Bless up.